The sun was descending slowly toward the western horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and crimson. The air carried a peculiar mixture of dust and silence, a quietness so profound it seemed to weigh upon the earth itself. President Ibrahim Traoré brought his vehicle to a halt at the entrance of an unfamiliar village, a place whose name appeared on no official maps and whose existence seemed forgotten by the government he led. This time, he had come without the usual trappings of power. There was no official convoy trailing behind him, no security detail flanking his sides, no photographers documenting his every move. Only a single local officer accompanied him, a man who knew these forgotten roads better than any city-bred bureaucrat ever could. Ibrahim's face bore an expression of deep seriousness, his eyes filled with unspoken questions, and his footsteps carried the weight of unwavering determination. He understood a fundamental truth that many politicians never grasp. The real heart of a nation doesn't beat in gleaming capital cities or in the marble halls of government buildings. The true pulse of a country lives in these overlooked villages, in the forgotten corners where ordinary people struggle through their daily existence, their voices rarely heard by those in power. The village roads were in a state of terrible disrepair, cracked and broken like the promises made by previous administrations. Houses constructed from mud and straw leaned precariously, their walls bearing witness to decades of neglect. On the faces of the villagers, Ibrahim could see a particular kind of exhaustion, not the simple tiredness that comes from honest labor, but the bone-deep weariness that injustice creates, the fatigue that settles into a person's soul when they've been ignored for too long. Some women, upon seeing strangers approach, quickly closed their doors, their movements betraying years of learned caution. A group of children sat silently beneath an ancient tree, their unusual quietness suggesting that even speaking freely had become something to fear in this place. It was as if an invisible hand pressed down upon the village, enforcing an unspoken code of silence. Ibrahim walked slowly toward an old well that stood at the village center, its stones worn smooth by countless hands over countless years. He bent down to examine the water, peering into its murky depths. The water was cloudy and brown, contaminated by sediment and likely worse. Yet even in this polluted water, Ibrahim could see the reflection of his own resolve, his determination to change things shimmering back at him. At that precise moment, something extraordinary occurred. A small monkey appeared seemingly from nowhere, scampering across the dusty ground until it reached the well. The creature didn't flee in fear or scurry away in alarm. Instead, it sat down near Ibrahim with remarkable boldness, studying his face with an intensity that seemed almost human. Its dark eyes held an intelligence that transcended mere animal instinct. Then, in a gesture that would change everything, the monkey extended its small hand toward the water bottle Ibrahim carried at his side. The meaning was unmistakable, a universal request that needed no translation. "Please, give me water." A gentle smile crossed Ibrahim's face, the first real smile he'd worn since arriving in this troubled place. He unscrewed the cap of his bottle and carefully offered it to the unexpected visitor. The monkey drank gratefully, its throat working as cool water soothed its thirst. When it had finished, the creature did something even more unusual. It gazed up at the sky as if lost in contemplation, as if considering matters far beyond the simple satisfaction of thirst. In the next instant, the monkey raised one thin finger and pointed deliberately in a specific direction, northward, where a dense forest created a dark smudge against the horizon. Ibrahim followed the gesture with his eyes, his curiosity intensifying. What lay in that direction? What was this creature trying to communicate? The local officer who had accompanied Ibrahim shifted uncomfortably beside him. "Sir," he said with obvious skepticism in his voice, "it's just an ordinary animal. There's no need to take its actions seriously. Animals do strange things all the time." Ibrahim took a deep breath, his eyes never leaving the monkey's pointing finger. He spoke quietly, but with conviction. Sometimes nature speaks truths that humans bury deep in their hearts. Sometimes the voiceless have more to say than those who talk endlessly. The monkey remained where it was, as if it had come with a specific purpose and would not leave until that purpose was understood. Its eyes held an unusual gleam, a light that seemed to carry meaning, as if this small creature was trying desperately to communicate something of vital importance. Without fully understanding why, Ibrahim made a decision that would alter the course of many lives. He would follow where the monkey led. As he took his first steps in the direction the creature had indicated, the monkey turned, checked that Ibrahim was following, and began moving toward the forest. The declining sun cast their shadows long across the ground as they walked. In the distance, a bird's cry echoed through the evening air, its call seeming to carry a warning. This journey will not be ordinary. This path leads to something significant. That night, under a sky filled with stars, the monkey climbed to the roof of the small building where Ibrahim had been given shelter. It sat there for hours, gazing upward at the heavens as if reading messages written in the constellations. Tomorrow would be a day of decisions, of actions that could not be undone. The stars above seemed unusually bright that evening, scattered across the darkness like diamonds on black velvet. The village below was quiet, most families having retreated to their homes after another difficult day. But Ibrahim could not sleep. He stood at the window watching the monkey on the roof, wondering what strange fate had brought them together. In his years of political life, Ibrahim had learned to trust his instincts. And his instincts now told him that something significant was unfolding, something that went beyond normal understanding. The monkey's behavior was too purposeful, too directed to be mere animal randomness. There was intelligence at work here, and perhaps something more. A kind of cosmic guidance that rationalists would dismiss, but that Ibrahim, who had grown up listening to his grandmother's stories of spirits and signs, could not easily ignore. He thought about the faces he had seen in the village, the hollow eyes of women who had lost hope, the silent children who should have been playing and laughing, the men whose shoulders sagged under invisible weights. This place had been crushed by something, and he intended to find out what. Morning arrived with the gentle spread of golden light across the sky. The village had not yet fully awakened. Only a few early risers moved through the streets, preparing for another day of survival. But Ibrahim Traoré was already awake, his mind clear and focused despite the limited sleep he'd managed. He stepped outside quietly, not wanting to disturb anyone. To his amazement, but not his surprise, the monkey was already waiting by the door, sitting with the patient alertness of someone who knows exactly what needs to happen next. When it saw Ibrahim, it gave a slight nod, an unmistakably deliberate gesture, and then suddenly darted toward the dense trees at the village's edge. Ibrahim laced his boots, shouldered his bag, and turned back toward the building. The local officer who had been assigned to assist him emerged, his face showing confusion and concern. "Sir, are you going alone? This doesn't seem wise." "At least let me gather some men." Ibrahim paused, considering the offer. Then, in a tone that was soft but absolutely certain, he said, "We are not alone. Nature itself is with us. Sometimes the best company is the kind that cannot be corrupted." With that, he set off after the monkey, following its nimble form as it navigated the increasingly rough terrain. The path was far from easy. Uneven ground scattered with dry bushes, sharp stones, and fallen branches made every step a test of balance. The silence of the wilderness was profound, broken only occasionally by the call of a distant bird or the rustle of some unseen creature moving through the undergrowth. The monkey moved with purpose, pausing frequently to look back and ensure Ibrahim was still following. Each time it stopped, it seemed to offer reassurance. "Yes, you're on the right path. Keep coming. Trust me." The forest grew denser as they progressed, the canopy above blocking out much of the morning light. Ancient trees with twisted trunks stood like silent witnesses to centuries of history. The air smelled of earth and decay, of life and death intermingled in the eternal cycle of nature. Ibrahim found himself breathing more deeply, feeling more alive and present than he had in months of endless political meetings and bureaucratic negotiations. After approximately 30 minutes of hiking through increasingly wild country, they arrived at a location that felt both desolate and somehow significant. There, half buried in accumulated dirt and surrounded by overgrown vegetation, stood an old, dilapidated building. Its walls were crumbling, its roof partially collapsed, yet it remained standing like a sentinel guarding secrets that had been hidden for far too long. Ibrahim surveyed the area carefully, his trained eyes taking in every detail. Near the entrance, scattered across the ground, lay broken pottery, torn pieces of clothing, and the charred remains of old fires. These were the signs of human presence, but not of normal human activity. This was evidence of something darker. The monkey approached the entrance cautiously, sniffing at the ground near the door. Suddenly it jumped backward as if it had detected something dangerous or disturbing inside. Its reaction sent a clear message. Something terrible had happened here, and might still be happening. Ibrahim crouched low and pressed his ear against the gap beneath the door. From within came sounds that made his blood run cold. Soft, suppressed breathing, the faint rustle of movement made by people trying desperately to stay quiet. These were the sounds of captives, of human beings held against their will, clinging to whatever hope remained. He pulled out a small notebook from his pocket and began sketching rapidly, documenting everything with the precision of someone who understands that details matter. He noted the angle of the door, the potential alternate exits at the building's rear, the condition of the walls, the positions from which the structure could be approached without being seen. Every detail might prove crucial. The building itself told a story. It had once been a storage facility, perhaps for agricultural goods, built decades ago when this area had been more prosperous. Now it served a far more sinister purpose. The windows had been boarded up from the inside, and heavy locks secured the doors. This was a prison, hidden in plain sight, isolated enough that screams would go unheard. The monkey moved closer to Ibrahim and used its finger to draw a long line in the dirt, then pointed emphatically toward the trees that grew thick behind the building. Ibrahim nodded in understanding, his respect for this unusual guide growing by the moment. I see. There's another way in from the back. Good, that gives us options. The sun was climbing higher now, and the heat was becoming intense. Ibrahim made a decision. They would return to the village. Rushing in unprepared could cost lives, not just his own, but the lives of whoever was trapped inside that building. What was needed now was not courage alone, but careful planning and strategic thinking. As they made their way back through the forest, Ibrahim spoke aloud as if the monkey could understand every word. We won't act rashly. A single wrong move here could endanger many innocent lives. Patience and intelligence will serve us better than speed. The monkey responded with a soft sound, almost like a murmur of agreement. It was becoming increasingly difficult for Ibrahim to think of this creature as merely an animal. There was something more here, something that defied easy explanation. During the return journey, Ibrahim's mind raced with possibilities and plans. He thought about who in the village could be trusted, who had the courage to act, who possessed the skills they would need. This would require more than just brute force. It would require coordination, timing, and above all, the moral clarity to ensure that in fighting monsters, they did not become monsters themselves. Upon returning to the village, Ibrahim quietly summoned a few young men he had observed during his time there, individuals whose eyes still held fire, whose spirits had not been entirely crushed by years of powerlessness. They came to him slowly, speaking in hushed voices, as if fear still had its hand around their throats. "If you lead us, we will follow," one young man said, his words barely above a whisper. "But we need someone to show us the way. We've been afraid for so long." His name was Amadou, and he was perhaps 25 years old with the lean build of someone who had known hunger. His hands were calloused from farm work, but his eyes held something that hardship had not extinguished. Behind him stood three others: Boubacar, a broad-shouldered young man who had once dreamed of becoming a teacher; Fatima, a fierce young woman whose sister had disappeared 2 years ago; and Hassan, quiet and intense, who had taught himself to read despite never attending school. Ibrahim looked each of them in the eyes, seeing both their fear and their buried strength. In a tone that was firm yet gentle, he told them, "Tomorrow before sunrise we will act. But remember this above all, no innocent person must be harmed. We will save lives, not take them. We will use our minds, not just our muscles. Fatima spoke up, her voice steady despite the emotion behind it. Sir, what exactly did you find out there? Ibrahim's expression darkened. A prison hidden in the forest. I heard voices inside, girls, women. They're being held captive. We're going to free them. The young people exchanged glances. Boubacar asked the question they were all thinking. The gang? The traffickers everyone whispers about but no one dares to confront? Yes, Ibrahim confirmed. The same ones who have operated with impunity for too long, who have stolen daughters from villages across this region, who have corrupted local officials and intimidated anyone who might oppose them. Tomorrow, their reign ends. Hassan, the quiet one, finally spoke. People have tried before. They disappeared. How can we succeed where others have failed? It was a fair question, and Ibrahim respected the young man for asking it. Because we have something they don't expect, unity of purpose, careful planning, and the element of surprise. They've grown comfortable, arrogant. They believe themselves untouchable. That arrogance will be their downfall. That night, the monkey once again climbed to the roof and sat gazing at the stars. Its eyes held that same mysterious gleam, as if it could sense that the moment of truth was approaching rapidly. Ibrahim spent most of the dark hours awake, poring over the map he had sketched. He marked 3 possible approaches to the building, noted the position of the hill behind it, and meticulously planned every phase of what would need to happen. The old warehouse, for that was clearly what the building had once been, had to be approached with absolute precision. The monkey sat on the windowsill throughout this planning session, watching intently as if it too was memorizing the strategy. At one point, it jumped down onto the table and traced its small finger along the route Ibrahim had drawn, stopping at the rear entrance. Ibrahim smiled. Yes, exactly. That's our primary entry point. You understand, don't you? The creature tilted its head, and Ibrahim could have sworn he saw understanding in those dark eyes. In the hours before dawn, he assembled his small team. The 4 young villagers arrived as agreed, their faces showing determination mixed with understandable nervousness. They were joined by Officer Diallo, an elderly policeman who had quietly opposed the corruption in his department for years, waiting for someone with the authority and courage to actually do something. His hands shook slightly, not from fear, but from age and perhaps from the Parkinson's disease he tried to hide, but his mind was sharp and his moral compass unwavering. 2 women also joined them. Aminata, who knew every trail and path in the surrounding forest from years of gathering medicinal herbs, and Mariam, a midwife who insisted on coming in case medical care was needed. These were not soldiers, but they were driven by something more powerful than military training. They were driven by the need to do what was right. Ibrahim explained the plan in careful detail. We will win this battle not with bullets, but with intelligence. No one's life should be unnecessarily endangered. The girls who have been imprisoned, we're going to give them back their freedom, their dignity, their futures. He spread the map on the table, and everyone gathered close. Aminata, you and Hassan will position yourselves here at the north approach. You're our lookouts. If anyone approaches from that direction, you signal immediately. Boubacar and Fatima, you cover the front entrance from these positions. Officer Diallo, Mariam, and I will make the actual entry through the rear. Amadou, you're our runner. You stay mobile and relay messages between groups. At that moment, the monkey jumped onto the table and placed its finger on the exact spot on the map where Ibrahim had marked the location of the suspicious sounds, where the captives were likely being held. Ibrahim gently placed his hand over the monkey's, a gesture of partnership that transcended species. Yes, exactly right. You've shown us the way. Now we must follow it through. By evening, the planning was complete. They would carry no weapons of violence, only tools for breaking locks and chains. They would move in silence. They would rely on surprise, on righteousness, and on the element that their enemies would never expect, that someone actually cared enough to challenge them. One of the young men voiced the fear they all felt. Sir, what if there are more of them than we expected? What if they're heavily armed? Ibrahim took a deep breath before responding, his voice carrying absolute conviction. When your intention is pure, when your cause is just, fear itself becomes imprisoned. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the determination to act despite fear. Remember that. He paused, then continued. But let me be clear. If at any point I judge that the risk to innocent lives is too great, we will retreat and find another way. Heroism is not the same as recklessness. We're here to save lives, not to throw them away in a gesture of defiance. As evening melted into night, as darkness settled over the village like a blanket, the monkey came and perched on Ibrahim's shoulder. In its eyes was something that looked remarkably like prayer, like hope made visible. Ibrahim looked up at the sky. The moon was emerging from behind the hills, spilling its pale light across the land. He spoke softly, but with iron determination. Tomorrow will belong to humanity. Tomorrow, we strike a blow for justice. The team dispersed to get what rest they could before the pre-dawn operation. Ibrahim watched them go, these ordinary people preparing to do extraordinary things. He thought about the captives in that building, enduring another night of fear and despair, not knowing that tomorrow would bring either liberation or, if things went wrong, possibly something worse. He could not fail them. He would not fail them. The hour before dawn is the quietest time in any day, the moment when even the night creatures have settled and the day animals have not yet awakened. It was in this profound silence that Ibrahim and his small team approached the old warehouse. They moved like shadows, their footsteps carefully placed to avoid making any sound. The monkey led the way, occasionally pausing to sniff the air or to signal with a raised hand when they needed to stop and wait. It was extraordinary how well this creature understood stealth, as if it had conducted such missions before. The forest at this hour was a place of deep shadows and uncertain shapes. Every tree trunk could have been a person. Every movement of leaves in the breeze could have been someone approaching. The team's nerves were stretched tight, adrenaline sharpening their senses to almost painful clarity. When they reached the perimeter of the clearing where the warehouse stood, Ibrahim signaled for everyone to take their positions. Aminata and Hassan melted into the shadows to the north, becoming virtually invisible among the trees. Boubacar and Fatima took up positions that gave them clear views of the front approach. Amadou stationed himself at a central point where he could see and communicate with all groups. The building looked even more sinister in the pre-dawn darkness, its broken windows like hollow eyes staring out at nothing. A single dim light glowed inside. Someone was awake, keeping guard. Ibrahim, Officer Diallo, and Mariam moved carefully toward the rear entrance that the monkey had indicated. The door there was secured with a heavy padlock, but it was old and rusted. Using tools they had brought, they worked carefully to remove it without making excessive noise. Every metallic scrape sounded impossibly loud in the stillness, but they persevered. Officer Diallo's hands shook as he worked the lockpicks. Whether from his condition or from tension, it was impossible to say. But his lifetime of police work had taught him many skills, including this one. After what felt like an eternity but was probably only 3 minutes, the lock clicked open. Finally, the lock gave way. Ibrahim eased the door open just wide enough to slip inside. The monkey followed immediately, its small form allowing it to move through the gap with ease. Mariam came next, and then Officer Diallo, who wheezed slightly from the exertion. The stench that hit them was overwhelming. Sweat, fear, human waste, and despair all mixed together in the stagnant air. Ibrahim fought back the urge to gag, forcing himself to breathe through his mouth. Beside him, Mariam pressed a cloth to her face, her eyes watering. As their eyes adjusted to the deeper darkness inside, they could make out shapes, human forms huddled together, some sleeping fitfully, others simply sitting in hopeless resignation. The space was larger than it had appeared from outside. A single room that had once stored grain or equipment, but now served as a prison for dozens of souls. These were the stolen daughters of the region, girls taken from their families and held here for purposes too dark to contemplate without rage. Some looked barely into their teens, others were young women in their 20s. All bore the marks of captivity. Unwashed hair, torn clothing, the blank expressions of people who had abandoned hope. The monkey moved forward carefully, approaching the nearest captive. It gently placed its small hand on a young girl's arm. She opened her eyes, and in that first moment of waking, Ibrahim saw something shift in her expression, the initial terror giving way to confused hope as she realized these newcomers were not her captors. Ibrahim held a finger to his lips, signaling silence. He whispered urgently, "We're here to help. We're going to get you out, but you must stay absolutely quiet. Can you do that?" The girl nodded, tears beginning to stream down her face, tears of relief so profound that her whole body shook with them. She turned to the girl next to her, touching her shoulder, passing the message silently. Working quickly but carefully, Ibrahim's team began cutting through the chains that bound the captives. The chains were not attached to walls but looped through iron rings driven into the floor, allowing limited movement but making escape impossible. The sound of metal being severed seemed deafening, but they had no choice. One by one, the girls were freed from their physical restraints, though the psychological chains would take far longer to break. Officer Diallo worked with grim efficiency, his shaking hand somehow steady when it mattered most. Mariam moved among the freed captives, whispering reassurances, quickly assessing who might need immediate medical attention, offering water from the bottles they had brought. The monkey moved among them like a small angel of comfort, touching each girl gently as she was freed, as if transferring courage and hope through its touch. Some of the girls reached out to stroke its fur, finding comfort in the simple warmth of a living creature that asked nothing of them and offered only gentleness. The atmosphere in that dark prison began to shift, fear giving way to cautious optimism. Some girls began to cry quietly, others clutched each other's hands. One young woman, her leg infected from where the shackle had rubbed her ankle raw, tried to stand and nearly collapsed. Mariam caught her, supporting her weight, examining the wound with professional concern. Ibrahim glanced toward the dirty window where dawn light was beginning to seep through. They had perhaps half of the captives freed, but time was running out. The morning was coming, and with it, the possibility that the traffickers would arrive for their routine check. He worked faster, his fingers bleeding now from the rough metal of the chains. But he didn't stop. Beside him, Officer Diallo muttered prayers under his breath as he worked, decades of faith finding expression in this moment of crisis. Ibrahim whispered urgently to those they had freed, "Grace is near." "Just a few more moments. We're almost—" He never finished the sentence. From outside came the unmistakable sound of motorcycle engines, multiple vehicles approaching fast. Ibrahim's heart sank. The captors were returning, and they had been discovered. His mind raced. They had freed perhaps 30 of the captives, but 20 more remained chained. They could not abandon them, but neither could they all escape quickly enough to avoid confrontation. The decision crystallized in an instant. "Mariam," he whispered urgently, "take those who are freed and get them out the back way. Aminata knows the forest paths. She'll be waiting. Move now, silently, quickly." Mariam's eyes showed her understanding and her resistance to leaving him. "Sir, you can't." "I can and I will. Go. Save those you can. We'll handle this." Officer Diallo nodded in agreement, his face grim but determined. "The boy is right. Get them out. We'll buy you time." As Mariam began shepherding the freed captives toward the rear exit, Ibrahim and Officer Diallo positioned themselves near the front of the building, while continuing to work frantically to free the remaining prisoners. The monkey, instead of fleeing, climbed to a position above the main entrance, its dark eyes alert and focused. Ibrahim reacted instantly, his hand shooting up in a signal that froze everyone in place. He mouthed silently, "Don't move! Don't make a sound!" His remaining team melted into the shadows, pressing themselves against walls or behind old crates. The monkey scurried up the wall with remarkable speed, positioning itself above the door where it could see without being seen. Its eyes gleamed in the dim light, alert and ready. Outside, they could hear dust being churned up as vehicles skidded to stops. Doors slammed. Rough voices called out to each other, filled with the casual cruelty of men who believed themselves untouchable. 4 vehicles had arrived, disgorging men armed with weapons and attitude. Their faces bore the marks of brutality and arrogance. These were men who had committed terrible acts and faced no consequences. They laughed and joked as they approached, completely unaware that their operation had been compromised. One of them, clearly the leader, laughed as he spoke to his companions. "Looks like someone's been messing with our property. Time to teach another lesson about respecting other people's business." The leader was a large man, with a scarred face and dead eyes. Eyes that had long ago ceased to see other humans as anything more than commodities. His name was Sekou, and he had built his trafficking empire through violence and corruption, paying off officials and eliminating anyone who posed a threat. Ibrahim held his breath, his mind racing through options. His small team was concealed, but they were also trapped. If shooting started, innocent people would die. He needed another approach, something that would give them the advantage despite being outnumbered and outgunned. He looked around frantically, taking inventory of everything in the warehouse that might be useful. Old barrels, some containing kerosene, lengths of chain, wooden beams. His mind worked furiously, constructing a plan from these meager resources. The gang's leader, Sekou, with his distinctive scarred arm, raised his voice. "Check inside. Maybe one of the new girls is trying something stupid. Make sure they understand their situation." 2 men approached the entrance. They were younger than Sekou, probably in their 20s, with the swagger of those who had been given power without earning wisdom. Both carried pistols openly, making no effort to conceal their weapons. In a place this remote, who would challenge them? Just as the first one was about to step through the doorway, the monkey acted. From its position above, it dropped a piece of wood directly in front of the man's foot. He jumped back, startled and suddenly alert. "Who's there?" Sekou shouted, his hand moving to the weapon at his belt. "Show yourself now!" Ibrahim pressed himself harder against the wall, signaling frantically to Officer Diallo and the remaining captives. "Wait! Not yet! We need the right moment." His eyes were calculating, looking for any advantage, any opportunity. 2 gang members entered cautiously, weapons drawn. The interior was dark enough that their eyes needed time to adjust. They moved slowly, sweeping their guns across the space, looking for any sign of intrusion. One of them noticed immediately that several chains lay cut on the floor, the freed captives having already escaped through the rear. "Boss," he shouted. "Someone's been here! Chains are cut!" The monkey, understanding perfectly what needed to happen, suddenly jumped down and scampered loudly toward the far corner of the room, creating a distraction. Both men turned toward the sound and moved to investigate, assuming one of the captives was trying to escape. "Gotcha now," one of them muttered, raising his weapon. This was the opening Ibrahim had been waiting for. Moving with practiced silence, he came up behind them. With precise strikes, he disarmed both men before they fully understood what was happening. Officer Diallo, despite his age and trembling hands, moved with surprising speed to secure the weapons, kicking them well out of reach. Outside, Sekou heard the scuffle and reached for his gun. But at that exact moment, the monkey launched itself from the doorway, landing on the man's arm and biting down hard on his scarred flesh. Sekou screamed, "What the hell? Get this thing off me!" His men hesitated, confused by the chaos, unsure whether to shoot at the animal without hitting their boss. Ibrahim burst through the door and, using the moment of distraction, delivered a powerful blow that sent Sekou sprawling to the ground. His weapon skittered across the dust, useless, but Sekou was not alone, and the situation was far from resolved. 3 more gang members stood by the vehicles, now alert and reaching for their weapons. This was the moment of greatest danger, the moment when everything could fall apart. From the forest, Boubacar and Fatima had been watching, waiting for their moment. Now they acted. Boubacar, using a slingshot he had fashioned, launched a stone that struck one gunman's hand just as he was raising his pistol. The weapon fell to the ground. Fatima, moving with the stealth Aminata had taught her, circled behind another man and kicked his legs out from under him. The element of surprise was complete. The traffickers had expected an easy day of business as usual. Instead, they found themselves under coordinated attack from multiple directions by opponents they couldn't clearly see or count. Hassan and Amadou emerged from their positions as well, joining the fray. Hassan, despite his quiet nature, fought with the fury of someone who had watched injustice for too long. Amadou's youth gave him speed, darting in and out, creating confusion. The remaining gang members stood frozen, their confidence evaporating as they realized they had walked into a trap. Ibrahim's team emerged from hiding, surrounding the criminals before they could react. Not a single shot was fired. Intelligence, speed, and righteous courage had won the day. Within minutes, the situation was completely reversed. The traffickers' weapons lay scattered on the ground. The men who had terrorized this region for years now stood with their hands bound, their expressions showing shock and the first hints of fear they'd likely felt in a very long time. Sekou, the leader, tried to maintain his defiance. "Do you know who I am? Do you know who I'm connected to? You're all dead." "You're all—" Ibrahim stepped close to him, his voice quiet but carrying an unmistakable authority. "I know exactly who you are. And I know that your reign of terror ends today. Your connections won't save you. The law will reach you now, and you will face justice for everything you've done." Ibrahim took a deep breath, the tension slowly leaving his shoulders. He looked up at the monkey, which was now perched on a low wall, breathing hard from the exertion. Ibrahim smiled, his voice filled with genuine affection. "Once again, my friend, you've saved us. This would not have been possible without you." The monkey tilted its head and made a soft sound, as if to say, "It wasn't me. Goodness itself saved us today." Officer Diallo was securing the last of the prisoners when his radio crackled to life. The backup he had quietly requested before the operation had finally arrived, 3 police vehicles coming up the road, legitimate officers he had personally vetted, men he knew were not corrupted by Sekou's money. Inside the warehouse, the atmosphere had transformed completely. The silence now was not the silence of despair, but of overwhelming relief. Chains had been cut. Doors had been opened. For the first time in weeks or months, light was entering this place of darkness. Ibrahim lit an old lamp that hung from the wall. As illumination spread through the space, he could finally see clearly the faces of those they had rescued, nearly 50 young women in total, their ages ranging from teenagers to young adults. They were the stolen daughters of countless families, taken from their lives and imprisoned here for unspeakable purposes. Some sat on the floor weeping openly, their tears washing away weeks of suppressed grief. Others held each other, finding comfort in shared survival. Still others simply stared, as if unable to believe that rescue had actually come. Each face told a story of suffering, but also of survival. There was Aisha, only 15, taken from her family's market stall 3 months ago. There was Zara, who had been preparing for university when she was kidnapped from a bus stop. There was Khadija, a mother whose baby had been taken from her. She didn't even know if her child still lived. Ibrahim walked among them slowly, meeting as many eyes as he could. His voice, when he spoke, was gentle but strong. "You are free now. This land belongs to you again. Your dreams are yours to shape. No one will ever chain you again. I make this promise not just as a president, but as a human being who believes in justice." His words carried the weight of absolute conviction, the kind of certainty that helps heal wounded spirits. The monkey approached one young woman who sat alone, her arms wrapped around herself. Her name was Salimata, and she had been captive the longest, almost a year. She had nearly forgotten what hope felt like. It sat beside her and very gently touched her hair, a gesture of pure compassion. The girl looked at the small creature and whispered, "Thank you." It was perhaps the first word of gratitude spoken in this place in a very long time, and it seemed to break something loose in the air. Suddenly others were speaking too, crying, calling out names of family members they hoped to see again. Mariam had returned with medical supplies from the village, and now she moved among the freed captives, treating wounds, offering water and food, assessing who needed urgent care. Many had infections from their shackles, malnutrition from inadequate food, and injuries from abuse. But beyond the physical wounds, Mariam could see the deeper trauma, the psychological scars that would take far longer to heal. "This one needs to get to a hospital soon," Mariam called to Ibrahim, indicating a girl whose fever was dangerously high, "and several others need proper medical attention within the next few hours." Ibrahim nodded. "The police vehicles are outside. We'll transport everyone to the regional hospital immediately. No delays, no bureaucracy. These girls have suffered enough." Outside, police vehicles were arriving, proper authorities who had been alerted to come and take custody of the criminals. Ibrahim had given specific orders. "Handle them according to law. We will defeat them not with revenge, but with justice properly administered." The gang members were loaded into vehicles, their heads down. Their earlier arrogance completely vanished. The scarred leader, Sekou, who had been so confident, now wept quietly, whether from fear or shame or simply the shock of being held accountable after so many years of impunity. Ibrahim approached him one final time before the police took him away. "You thought power came from inflicting suffering on those weaker than yourself. But real power, true strength, comes from protecting the vulnerable, from lifting up those who have fallen. You forgot that, and now you will face the consequences." Sekou looked up at him, his face a mixture of rage and desperation. "You don't understand. This operation, it's bigger than me. There are people in the government, in the military, people who... Then they will fall too," Ibrahim interrupted firmly. "Give their names to the investigators. Perhaps cooperation will earn you some mercy from the court. But your days of terrorizing innocent people are over." The man had no response. There was nothing he could say that would change what was coming. As the criminals were driven away, villagers began arriving to help. They brought blankets, water, food. News had spread quickly through the community. The nightmare was over. The girls were being freed. The freed captives were given what comfort could be offered. The monkey moved among them all, a small ambassador of hope that seemed to carry meaning beyond its size. One elderly woman from the village approached Ibrahim. She was the same woman who, days earlier, had mentioned in passing that her daughter had disappeared 6 months ago. Her eyes had been searching desperately among the freed captives, scanning each face with desperate hope, and now she found what she was looking for. Her name was Hawa, and she had been a widow for 10 years, raising her daughter Fatou alone through unimaginable hardship. When Fatou disappeared, it had nearly destroyed her. But she had never stopped hoping, never stopped praying, even when everyone told her that girls taken by the traffickers never returned. One of the freed girls stepped forward hesitantly. She was thin, her clothes hanging loose on her frame, but her eyes held light again. She moved slowly toward the elderly woman, and recognition dawned on both their faces simultaneously. Fatou! It was Fatou! The old woman seemed to turn to stone for a heartbeat. Then, with a cry that came from the depths of her soul, she ran forward and threw her arms around her daughter. Their embrace was fierce, desperate, full of all the words they hadn't been able to say during their separation. "My child, my precious child," the mother sobbed, her whole body shaking. "I knew you were alive. I knew God would send someone. I never stopped believing, never stopped praying. Every night I prayed. Every morning I looked toward the road hoping to see you coming home." Fatou could barely speak through her tears. "Mama, I thought I would never see you again. I thought I would die in that place. But I held onto your face in my memory. I remembered your voice. It kept me alive." They sank to the ground together, surrounded quickly by other village women who brought water, food, gentle words. The other freed girls watched this reunion, some with joy, others with sadness for families they might never see again. Some had been taken from distant regions. Some didn't even know where they were from anymore. Ibrahim watched this reunion, and despite his efforts to maintain composure, tears filled his eyes. He stepped back, leaning against a wall for support, overwhelmed by the emotion of the moment. The monkey sat on his shoulder and gently touched his cheek as if to say, "This moment. This is what we came for. This is the destination." Officer Diallo stood beside Ibrahim, his own eyes wet. "In 40 years of police work," he said quietly, "I've seen too much evil and not enough goodness. Today Today restores something in me I thought was lost. Mother and daughter remained on the ground, holding each other as if they might disappear if they let go. The rescued girls were free now in body, though Ibrahim knew that the wounds on their hearts and minds would take years to heal, if they ever fully healed at all. "We can open doors," Ibrahim said quietly to his team. "But only time and love can heal deep wounds. What happens next? The real healing that will take years and the support of the entire community." Mariam nodded in agreement. "I'll work with the hospital to arrange trauma counseling. These girls will need professional help to process what they've been through, and we'll need to protect them from stigma. Some communities blame the victims instead of the criminals." "Then we'll educate those communities," Ibrahim said firmly. "We'll make it clear that these young women are heroes who survived, not victims to be ashamed of. We'll change how people think about this." The police officer approached with an update. "Sir, all the criminals have been transferred to the central city. Court proceedings will begin tomorrow. The evidence we've gathered is overwhelming. Several of the captives have agreed to testify." Ibrahim nodded approvingly. "Ensure they have protection. These traffickers have connections, and desperate men do dangerous things. I want guards on the hospital, on the courthouse, on every witness. No one touches these girls again." "Already arranged, sir. The capital is sending a special unit." "Good. And remember, justice must be served not quickly but correctly. Every step must follow the law. We defeat them by being better than them, not by sinking to their level." At that moment, a village child spotted the monkey and clapped her hands in delight. The monkey leaped down from its perch, climbed a nearby tree in an acrobatic display that brought laughter, then descended and gently patted the child's head. Laughter rippled through the crowd, perhaps the first genuine laughter this place had heard in years. The elderly mother Hawa looked up at Ibrahim through her tears. "Sir, you are not just a president. You are God's mercy made visible on this earth. You came when no one else would. You cared when others looked away." Ibrahim responded with characteristic humility. "I'm just a human being. But when the heart is pure and the intention is just, nature itself shows the way. I didn't do this alone. We all did it together. Your neighbors, these young people who risked their lives, Officer Diallo who fought corruption for years, and yes, even this small creature who guided us." He gestured to the monkey, which had now returned to his shoulder. Sometimes wisdom comes from unexpected places. Sometimes the smallest voice speaks the loudest truth. A gentle breeze moved through the village, carrying away some of the darkness that had lingered there so long. Birds were returning to their nests, normal life resuming its patterns. The mother took her daughter's hand, and together they walked toward home, supported by other women, the monkey following behind them like a silent guardian. From the mosque, the evening call to prayer echoed across the village, the first time it had been heard in weeks. The imam had been too frightened to make the call, worried that drawing attention might bring the gang's wrath. But now, with the criminals arrested and justice beginning its work, he climbed the minaret and sang out the ancient words. It was as if even prayer itself had been afraid, but now found its voice again. Boubacar, one of the young men who had helped in the rescue, stood listening to the call to prayer, tears streaming down his face. "I didn't think I'd ever hear that sound again," he said to no one in particular. "I thought they'd silenced everything good in this place." Fatima, who had fought alongside him, placed a hand on his shoulder. "They tried. But goodness is stronger than evil if only we have the courage to act. Today proved that." As evening settled, a gathering formed in the village square. People came from all directions, women, children, elderly folks, young men, all wanting to hear from the man who had changed their lives in just 3 days. President Ibrahim stood among them, not above them, dressed in simple clothes that distinguished him not at all from those he had come to help. His face showed no arrogance, no self-congratulation, only peace and perhaps a touch of exhaustion. The ordeal had taken its toll physically, but spiritually he felt more alive than he had in months of political theater in the capital. The monkey sat on the ground nearby, playing idly with a small pebble, while silence filled the air, the respectful silence of people preparing to listen to words they knew would matter. Ibrahim began to speak, his voice carrying clearly in the still evening air. I didn't come here as a president. I came as a human being. I saw how fear can enslave an entire community, how silence can become a prison stronger than any chains. But today I see that you are free. Your faces carry light again. And this light didn't come from guns or weapons. It came from faith, from courage, from the determination to do what's right. The villagers listened with complete attention. An old farmer named Usmain stood up, his weathered hands clasped together. Sir, we have seen many rulers in our lifetime. We've seen politicians come in expensive cars, make promises, and disappear. But none came among us as you have. You risked your own safety for ours. You could have sent soldiers, but you came yourself. Why? What made you do this? Ibrahim smiled gently. Because true power exists to protect, not to dominate. If someone has authority and doesn't use it for good, then they are also guilty. Guilty of inaction. Guilty of allowing evil to flourish. Leadership is not about sitting in comfortable offices making speeches. It's about standing with people in their hardest moments, even when it's uncomfortable or dangerous. He paused, looking around at the faces. I've learned something in my years in politics. It's easy to love people from a distance, to make policies that sound good on paper. But real change requires proximity. You have to see people's faces, hear their stories, smell the reality of their suffering. Otherwise, you're just playing games with their lives. He gestured toward the monkey, which had now climbed back onto his shoulder. This is my friend. But he's more than just an animal. He's a messenger from nature itself. He reminded me that when a human heart is pure, everything around us, the earth, the air, the creatures, they all become our allies. Nature supports those who live with justice. A young woman named Aisata spoke up. Sir, how do we keep this from happening again? How do we protect ourselves when you're not here? It was the question Ibrahim had been expecting, and the most important one. That's exactly what I want to talk about. You see, I can arrest these criminals today, but tomorrow new ones might arise if the conditions that allowed them to flourish remain unchanged. Some of the young men applauded, but Ibrahim raised his hand for quiet. His expression became more serious. Now comes the harder part. You must become the guardians of your own community. Injustice grows not only through violence, but through silence. When you see something wrong, you must speak up. If you remain silent, tomorrow it could be your daughter, your sister, your mother suffering. Evil thrives when good people do nothing. Usmain spoke again. But sir, we tried to speak before. We went to the police, to local officials. They either did nothing or worked with the criminals. How can we trust the system? You can't, Ibrahim answered bluntly, and a murmur of surprise went through the crowd. Not entirely, not yet. The system has been corrupted, and rebuilding trust will take time. That's why I'm announcing several things tonight. He pulled out a paper from his pocket, notes he had been making. First, I'm establishing a direct hotline to my office for this region. Any report of trafficking, corruption, or abuse can be reported directly, bypassing local officials. Second, I'm assigning an independent monitor to this area. Officer Diallo has agreed to take the position. He'll report directly to my office, not to the regional command. Officer Diallo looked surprised, but nodded his acceptance. Third, Ibrahim continued, I'm authorizing the creation of community protection committees. You will choose your own leaders, establish your own watch systems. The government will provide training and resources, but the power will remain with you. Because you know this place better than any outsider ever could, the elderly woman Hawa stepped forward, her voice strong despite her tears. We promise you, sir. No more silence. We will watch over each other. We will protect our children. And we will teach them to be brave, as you have been brave. Ibrahim's face softened with approval. That's all I ask. I can create laws, but you must create the conscience that enforces them. You must be the guardians of your own dignity. He looked around at the gathering, seeing hope where there had been despair. There's one more thing I want to say. Some of you might feel ashamed about what happened here. You might think you failed because you didn't stop the traffickers sooner. But I want you to understand. You are not responsible for the actions of evil people. The shame belongs to them, not to you. These girls who were taken and have now returned, they are heroes. They survived. They endured. and they will rebuild their lives with your support. I don't want to hear anyone in this village speaking of them with anything but respect and admiration. Is that clear? Yes, sir, many voices called out. Good, because if I hear reports that any of these young women are being stigmatized or blamed, I will return. And I will be far less patient than I was this time. The crowd laughed at his mock-serious tone, understanding that behind the humor was absolute seriousness. The monkey suddenly let out a sharp whistle-like sound, as if declaring that a sacred promise had been made and witnessed. The crowd responded with applause and calls of agreement. As the sun disappeared behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold, Ibrahim looked around at the faces before him, faces that had been marked by fear just days ago, but now showed hope, determination, and renewed strength. My faith has been strengthened today, he said quietly, almost to himself, but loud enough for others to hear. When the heart is clean and the purpose is just, nature never abandons us. We are never truly alone. Young Hassan, who had fought in the rescue, asked, Sir, will you come back? Will you remember us? Ibrahim smiled. I will come back. Not just because I promise it, but because you are part of me now. What happened here changed me as much as it changed you. And yes, I will remember. How could I forget? The story of what happened in that small village spread rapidly, carried by word of mouth across the region. Within days, news had reached the capital city, and within weeks it had become national news, then international. Journalists came seeking the story, though Ibrahim insisted that the focus should be on the survivors and their courage, not on his role. A major newspaper ran the headline, President Leads Rescue Mission, 50 Girls Freed from Trafficking Ring. But the article that moved people most was written by Fatu, the girl who had been reunited with her mother. In simple, powerful words, she described her captivity and rescue, ending with, I thought God had forgotten me. But he sent a president who remembered that leaders are supposed to serve people, not the other way around. Other villages began reporting trafficking operations to authorities. People who had been silent for years found their voices. The network of criminals that had operated with impunity for so long began to crumble as arrest after arrest was made. Seku's testimony, given in exchange for a reduced sentence, exposed officials at multiple levels of government. Some fled the country. Others were arrested and faced trial. The investigation revealed a trafficking network that spanned 5 countries, had operated for over 15 years, and had destroyed hundreds of lives. But the rescue at the warehouse had been the crack in the dam that brought the whole corrupt structure flooding down. Within 6 months, a new anti-trafficking task force had been established, trained by international experts but staffed by locals who understood the terrain and culture. 17 major arrests were made. Safe houses were established for survivors. Education programs were launched to help communities identify and prevent trafficking. But for Ibrahim, the greatest reward was not the political capital he gained or the international praise he received. It was the memory of that elderly mother's face when she held her daughter again. It was the knowledge that 50 lives had been given back their futures. It was the understanding that he had remained true to the principles that had driven him into public service in the first place. The monkey had disappeared the morning after the rescue. Ibrahim woke to find it gone, vanished as mysteriously as it had appeared. He searched briefly, asking villagers if they had seen it, but no one had. Somehow he knew he wouldn't find it. The creature had fulfilled its purpose, delivered its message, and moved on to wherever it was needed next. But Ibrahim never forgot his unusual companion. In his office in the capital, he kept a small wooden carving of a monkey, a reminder that wisdom can come from the most unexpected sources. That guidance can appear in forms we might easily dismiss if we're not paying attention. He told the story often, though he knew many people thought it was embellished or metaphorical. Some journalists openly expressed skepticism that a monkey had really played such a role. Ibrahim didn't care. Let them think what they wanted. He knew the truth, that on those crucial days, a small creature had shown him the way, had helped him save lives, had reminded him of what truly mattered. In speeches, he would sometimes say, "Leadership is about being open to guidance from unexpected sources." The most important messages don't always come from advisors with degrees and titles. Sometimes they come from ordinary people, from children, from nature itself. The question is, are you listening? 5 years later, Ibrahim returned to that village. So much had changed that he barely recognized it. The roads had been repaired, not just patched, but properly rebuilt with drainage systems and shoulders. New buildings stood where ruins had been. A school had been constructed, its bright yellow walls visible from a distance. A health clinic operated 3 days a week, staffed by a nurse and visited regularly by a doctor. The well that had held such murky water now ran clear, fitted with a proper pump and filtration system funded by an international development grant. But the most important changes were in the people themselves. The village had elected its own council, which met weekly to discuss community issues and make decisions. Women served in leadership positions. 3 of the 7 council members were women, including Fatima, who had participated in the rescue and had since completed training as a community organizer. There was a community watch that kept families safe, not through violence or intimidation, but through awareness and rapid communication. A network of volunteers kept eyes on vulnerable members of the community, especially children and young women. The culture of silence had been replaced with one of vocal civic engagement. Children played freely in the streets, their laughter a sound that had been missing before. Young women walked with their heads high, pursuing education and opportunities their older sisters had been denied. The school had 120 students enrolled, with equal numbers of boys and girls, a significant change from previous generations. The elderly mother, Hawa, was still alive. Now caring for her grandchildren, Fatou had married a kind young man from a neighboring village and had 2 children. When they saw Ibrahim's convoy arriving, they rushed forward to greet him, joy evident on their faces. Fatou's oldest child, a little girl named Amina, was 4 years old. She had heard the story of her mother's rescue so many times that she recognized Ibrahim immediately. "You're the president who saved my mama!" she exclaimed, running up to him without any fear. Ibrahim scooped her up, his heart full. "Your mama saved herself by being strong and brave. I just opened a door." Fatou embraced him, tears streaming down her face. "You gave us back more than freedom," she said. "You gave us back our dignity, our future, our faith that good can win against evil. Because of what you did, my daughter will grow up in a different world than I did." Ibrahim embraced them both, his own emotions running deep. "I was only the instrument. You were the ones who had the courage to keep hoping, to survive, to rebuild. Look at what you've created here." They spent the afternoon touring the village, and Ibrahim met with the council. They reported challenges. Funding was always tight. Some old attitudes about women's roles died hard, and there were occasional reports of suspicious activity that might be trafficking-related. But overall, the trajectory was positive. "We remember what you taught us," Boubacar said. He was now a teacher at the school, having completed his training with a government scholarship. "When we see injustice, we speak. When we see someone in need, we act. And we teach the children the same." Hassan, the quiet young man who had fought in the rescue, had become a community health worker. "The girls who were rescued, most are doing well. 3 have gone to university. Several got married. A few struggled with trauma and needed additional help, which we provided. One died, unfortunately, suicide 2 years after the rescue. The wounds we couldn't see were too deep." Ibrahim's face fell at this news. "What was her name?" "Zara. She was 19 when she was taken, 21 when we freed her, 23 when she died." "She tried, sir." "She really tried. But sometimes the darkness is too strong." "We failed her," Ibrahim said quietly. "No," Mariam interjected. She still served as the village midwife and had taken training in trauma counseling. "The traffickers failed her. The society that stigmatized her failed her. Even with all our support, she couldn't escape what had been done to her. But, sir, without the rescue, all 50 would have died, either literally or spiritually. We saved 49 futures. That matters." Ibrahim nodded, though the weight of that one loss sat heavy on his heart. "It does matter. But we must do better. We must ensure that rescue is only the beginning, that recovery has all the support it needs." As he prepared to leave that evening, as his convoy waited to carry him back to the capital, Ibrahim noticed something. On the roof of the house where he'd stayed 5 years before, a small shape sat silhouetted against the setting sun. A monkey. Ibrahim's breath caught. He walked closer slowly, not wanting to startle it. The monkey sat perfectly still, watching him with dark, intelligent eyes. Ibrahim couldn't tell if it was the same one. Perhaps it was its offspring. Or perhaps monkeys were simply common in this area and he was reading meaning into coincidence. But as he watched, the creature raised one small hand in what looked remarkably like a gesture of farewell. Ibrahim raised his own hand in response, a smile crossing his face despite the tears in his eyes. "Thank you, my friend," he whispered. "Thank you for showing me the way. Thank you for reminding me what leadership really means." The monkey remained on the roof until Ibrahim's vehicle disappeared down the road. Then it turned and bounded away into the gathering dusk. Its mission, whatever that had been, apparently complete once more. Ibrahim Traoré continued his work as president for many years, always keeping in mind the lessons learned in that small village, that real power means protecting the powerless, that justice requires both courage and patience, that leadership means being willing to walk among the people you serve, and that sometimes wisdom comes from the most unexpected teachers. He established a personal tradition of visiting at least one remote village each month, traveling without the full presidential convoy, meeting with ordinary people, listening to their concerns. His staff called these monkey tours, though never where he could hear. But Ibrahim knew about the nickname and didn't mind. It reminded him of where he had learned what really mattered. The story of the monkey and the rescue became something of a legend, told around fires, shared between generations, embellished perhaps, but carrying a truth that transcended the specific facts. It became a parable about paying attention, about having the courage to act, about remembering that we are not separate from nature but part of it. In schools across the nation, children learned about the president and the monkey, usually presented as a moral tale about listening to wisdom in unexpected forms. Some teachers treated it as metaphor. Others insisted on its literal truth. The debate didn't matter, the lesson did, and in villages across the land, parents began teaching their children. When you see injustice, speak up. When someone needs help, act. And always, always remember that guidance can come from unexpected places, if only we're wise enough to recognize it and brave enough to follow where it leads. The legacy of those 3 days rippled outward through time and space, touching lives in ways impossible to measure. Legislation was strengthened, training programs were established, international cooperation improved. But beyond these systemic changes, something deeper shifted, a cultural recognition that ordinary people could make extraordinary differences. That courage was not the absence of fear, but the determination to act despite it. That leadership meant service rather than power. Years later, when Ibrahim was old and preparing to leave office, a journalist asked him, "What do you consider your greatest achievement as president?" Ibrahim thought for a long moment before answering. "There was a warehouse in a forgotten village where 50 young women were imprisoned. We freed them. That's not the greatest achievement of my presidency. It's the achievement that made the presidency meaningful. Everything else, the laws, the policies, the diplomatic successes, they matter because they serve people. They matter because they prevent another warehouse from existing." "And the monkey?" the journalist asked, smiling slightly. "Was it real?" Ibrahim smiled back. "Does it matter? The rescue was real. The girls were real. The courage of ordinary people who stood up to evil, that was real. If the monkey was a metaphor my mind created to justify following my instincts, or if it was truly a creature sent to guide me, the result is the same. We saved lives because we chose to act." "But personally," the journalist pressed, "what do you believe?" Ibrahim looked out his office window at the carved wooden monkey on his desk. "I believe that on the most important days of my life, when I was lost and uncertain, a small creature showed me the way. I believe that wisdom comes in many forms, and that we limit ourselves when we only listen to expected voices. I believe that nature, when we live in harmony with it and with each other, supports the cause of justice." He paused, then added, And I believe that somewhere out there that monkey is sitting on another rooftop, waiting to guide another lost soul toward doing the right thing. Because the world always needs guides, and they don't always wear suits or carry titles. The journalist published this interview, and it became one of the most read pieces of that year. People debated its meaning, analyzed its implications, argued over metaphor versus reality. But in a small village where a warehouse had once held prisoners, where a mother had once lost and then regained her daughter, where children now played freely in streets that had once known only fear, in that village, they simply smiled and remembered. They remembered a president who cared enough to come. They remembered young people who found their courage. They remembered an elderly policeman who finally got to serve justice instead of corruption. They remembered a monkey who led the way, and they taught their children, pay attention to the world around you. Listen to unexpected voices. Have the courage to act when you see wrong. And remember, sometimes the smallest creatures carry the most important messages. In the years that followed, every time someone in that region found the courage to report a crime, to stand up to corruption, to help a neighbor in need, they thought of that story. The rescue had been real, the freedom had been real, and the lesson had been real. That ordinary people, guided by conscience and courage, can change the world, one rescued life, one freed heart, one protected village at a time. And sometimes, on quiet evenings, villagers would see a monkey on a rooftop, gazing at the stars. They would smile and whisper thanks, whether to the creature itself, to the spirit it represented, or simply to the reminder that good can triumph over evil when people choose to act. The story continues, as all true stories do, in the hearts of those who remember, and in the actions of those who choose courage over comfort, justice over silence, humanity over cruelty. And somewhere, perhaps a small monkey sits watching, waiting for the next lost soul who needs guidance toward doing what is right. The end.